Evening and welcome to the June 23rd, 2025 City Council work session. Thank you all for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, there is no opportunity for public comment, and those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcasts and meetings materials page of the City of Eugene website. In case of a medical emergency, an automated external defibrillator, an AED, is located on the counter behind staff, located to your left on the west side of this room. And in case of an emergency evacuation, emergency exits are through the double doors located at the back of this room, and the doors to the patio can also be used as needed. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. I now call the June 23rd, 2025 City Council work session to order. And I will turn to the city manager to introduce our first topic, or our topic for this evening, a work session on urban growth strategies.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Really looking forward to this topic. There's been a lot of conversation, especially over the last few months, about how do we increase economic development? How do we increase housing? And what's your strategy and what's your vision? I think a lot of it comes back to the work that's happening in planning with urban growth strategies. So I'm excited to turn it over to Terry Harding to lead us through today's presentation.
Manager. Good evening, everyone. My name is Terry Harding. I'm the city's principal planner for community planning and design. I'm joined by senior planners Leah Rausch and Heather O'Donnell to provide you this update on urban growth strategies today. Before we begin, I want to note that the challenge of meeting our community's needs as we grow, especially our housing needs, is this working? Okay. Especially our housing needs is significant. It will take a concerted effort to address these needs for current and future residents of Eugene. We have been working on this project for a couple of years now, both technical work and working out in the community, so we have some meaningful progress to share with you. We're looking to share some updates, answer your questions, and get your feedback on the draft policies and actions. And if there's anything you're concerned about or you think is missing, we want to know that so we can bring back a package you can support initiating for adoption this fall. Your action to actually adopt the first pieces of urban growth strategies would occur in the fall of 2026. So this evening's presentation will provide a refresher on what's included in the project. Then I'll walk through the new policies we've drafted for community review. And then Leah and Heather will walk us through the types of actions Eugene will need to take to meet our housing and jobs needs. And then we'll move into your discussion. But the overall goal is to receive your feedback on where these policies and actions are headed. So let's begin with what is urban growth strategies. This project is identifying the tools, actions, policies, and land needed for the next 20 years to support living wage jobs and housing that everyone can afford. The work is largely state mandated. For example, the housing planning is following a new set of state rules. But it's also locally driven, following up on Envision Eugene and years of planning for compact mixed-use development and complete neighborhoods. The project will result in land supply studies, updates to the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan and our land use code, and an evaluation of our need to expand the urban growth boundary. With our housing need as large as it is, we believe we will need to expand. But until we complete our land supply studies, we don't know by how much. Although a lot of this project is state mandated, this suite of work also advances many of our city priorities shown here on this slide, and will be completed in several phases shown here. We began with a community engagement phase, which continues over the life of the project. Today, we'll be focusing on progress on our policy development and housing and jobs actions phases, and we'll return to you next year to discuss our land supply studies with you. So a quick highlights of our community engagement this year include that we have continued to engage with the community using both broad-reaching and focused strategies. Staff convened a community advisory panel composed of members from underserved communities to center their voices in the outcomes of our project work. And that launched in March of this year. Staff attended a series of meetings with the Youth Advisory Council in this room. Those were really great, to better understand the needs and priorities of young people in Eugene. We've facilitated a couple of meetings with a group of housing providers, architects, and advocates. We've been working with the Planning Commission, Sustainability Commission, and Active Transportation Committee to include their input. And lastly, staff has been getting out in the community, presenting at events like the annual neighborhood conference and tabling at the We Are Bethel event. A few consistent themes that we are hearing include the community wants more housing, and housing that is more affordable at all income levels in desirable locations, particularly housing affordable to lower and middle income households. People are very supportive of the idea of more mixed-use centers and as places to access goods and services and build community near where they live. And due to years of discrimination and exclusionary policies, accessing safe and affordable housing is not experienced equitably by members of underserved community groups. As a result of hearing all of those themes, you will see policies and actions that increase housing production, affordability and choice, encourage the development of mixed-use centers citywide, and prioritize the needs of members of underserved communities. Now we'll discuss the progress on our policy development phase. I'm going to share a bit about Eugene's comprehensive plan work in general, and then highlight just a few areas from the 2 chapters that we're working on that were included in your packet. Those lay the policy framework for housing and compact development actions that Leah and Heather will be discussing later in the presentation. Historically, Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County have shared a regional comprehensive plan for the metro area known as the Metro Plan. Due to legislative action in 2007, Eugene and Springfield have been developing their own comprehensive plans to provide land use policy direction within our separate UGBs. Because of the work involved in moving from one plan to another, the Eugene Comprehensive Plan is being developed in 3 phases. The first phase was adopted with Eugene's urban growth boundary in 2017, a few chapters. Second phase is underway now, and the third phase will be in the future to include natural resources and community resilience topics. But what is a comprehensive plan, you might ask? It is a document that serves as a roadmap. It guides the city in its planning for the land within our urban growth boundary. It is informed by years of community engagement upon which this work is based. Each chapter in the comp plan has a series of goals that articulate the community's overarching aspirations. And each chapter also contains policies that inform how Eugene grows in the future. Once adopted, the comprehensive plan guides the work of city staff in our land use planning, such as updating development regulations, developing community engagement plans, and prioritizing projects for funding. These comprehensive plan chapters we're working on now are scheduled for adoption in 2026 and 2027. They cover community engagement, compact development and urban design, housing, community health, public facilities and services, and land use. The land use chapter, chapter number 11, will also include an exciting parcel-specific land use diagram to replace and modernize the Metro Plan diagram within Eugene's urban growth boundary. And we have a story map that walks you through that project if you're interested in the detail. This winter and spring, we've been receiving input on the first drafts of these chapters that are included in your AIS. So today, I'm just going to highlight a couple of areas of Chapter 2, Compact Development, and Chapter 4, Housing, because they provide the policy support for the actions we'll be sharing with you. But all of these chapters listed on this slide are in your packet, and we welcome your input on any of those goals and policies that you can find there. We'll also expect more opportunities for discussion in the fall. Okay, so for compact development and urban design, this chapter guides the city's future efforts of using land inside the urban growth boundary in an efficient and attractive manner that increases opportunities for people to live in complete neighborhoods with access to goods and services. It also introduces policies on planning for centers and key corridors that are intended to increase commercial and residential uses and access to daily goods and services while reducing the need to rely on automobiles. Centers are one concept included in this chapter and a key strategy for building a more compact city. When we think of a center, we think of places that range in size and activity level from the largest, downtown, to mid-size core commercial centers and smaller neighborhood centers. They are convenient and climate-friendly, bringing goods and services closer to people's doorsteps. They are connected by key corridors, key transportation corridors, with high-quality infrastructure for people who walk, bike, and ride the bus. And we've also heard from the public the importance of centers as comfortable and safe places for people to gather and build community. How did we get to this map of centers that's on your screen now? This is our first draft map of Eugene's centers and key corridors, and these places were selected based on almost a year's worth of community input, including an interactive mapping activity where we asked community members where they go in their neighborhoods for the things they need, and we received over 600 responses. We also held a series of focus group style meetings with the Housing and Developer Working Group, the Youth Advisory Council, and a Community Advisory Council, Community Advisory Panel. With the community input in mind, staff then researched potential locations for centers based on their current land use designations and zoning to identify areas that are either operating as places of commerce or could be based on their allowed uses. Staff also excluded areas that were adjacent to industrially zoned parts of town because our commercial zones allow for residential uses, and our policies encourage more residential uses in and around centers. Lastly, staff incorporated neighborhood priorities where possible from neighborhood refinement plans like the River Road and Santa Clara Neighborhood Plan. Chapter 2 includes a goal and policies that direct the city to support higher intensity mixed-use development in or near key corridors and centers. The city's key corridors are shown on the map as dashed lines. They include portions of Coburg Road, Franklin Boulevard, South Willamette Street, West 11th Avenue, Highway 99 and Barger, River Road, and 6th and 7th Avenues. And they could be extended in the future, so they're shown as dotted lines with an arrow at the end. Key corridors are served by public transit and are already adopted in the transportation system plan. Centers policies are related to their different scales and uses. Different scales. Encouraging development and redevelopment in and around centers. And there are policies on the 2 climate-friendly areas, the little black stars on the maps, that council directed staff to proceed with last November. Okay, the last topic I'll talk about is the housing chapter. I want to touch quickly on this because it's important for our conversation today. It includes 4 goals and 29 policies for Eugene. And it's important to note that the city doesn't actually build the housing, but we do guide citywide efforts for increasing housing production, affordability, choice, and fairness. The draft goals and policies plan for housing that's affordable to all incomes, with a particular focus on lower and middle income households to meet our identified housing need. And the last thing I'd like to share with you about the comprehensive plan is about housing production. So this is one of the goals in the housing chapter. And it's important because producing more housing not only impacts our supply, but it's the most significant way we can increase housing affordability. The goal reads, develop and facilitate tools that increase the production of new housing, creating a supply of housing that meets the needs of current and future residents. Under this goal, there are currently 11 draft policies that help attain the goal of housing production. A few examples of the draft policies include removing barriers to housing production, incentives to increase access to housing, developing new and updated tools that encourage housing production, and increasing housing production in and near centers. I want to highlight Policy 4.7, New and Updated Tools, which directs the city to consider a wide array of incentives, fees, and exemptions that encourage the production of housing across the income spectrum, with an emphasis on increasing subsidized, affordable, and moderate income housing. This policy sets the framework for developing housing actions, which leads us into the next part of the presentation. Go ahead, Leah.
Right, thanks, Terry. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Councilors. Again, my name's Leah Roush. I'm a senior planner on the Community Planning and Design team. So, as Terry said, to implement these kind of draft citywide policies, as well as your existing council priorities, and find efficiency in our existing land supply, we will need to take some concrete actions to increase housing production, affordability, and choice, as well as support living wage jobs in Eugene. So as we shared in more detail back in February this year, the new Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, or the ONA, really changes how cities will plan for housing in the future within our urban growth boundary. Using the 2025 ONA, we know that Eugene will need to support the production of more than 26,000 new dwelling units in the next 20 years. To put that number into perspective, we have about 90,000 dwelling units in Eugene today. So that means we're planning to increase our housing stock by roughly 30% over 20 years. To meet this much more comprehensive need, Eugene should really be supporting the production of about 70% more units each year for the next 10 years as compared to the last 10 years. So using data from our growth monitoring program, we know that Eugene saw an average of about 965 new units per year over the last decade, and of those, about 100 each year was subsidized affordable housing. To meet our new housing need under the ONA, Eugene should see closer to 1,600 new units each year for the next decade, including about 700 each year that are affordable to households with the lowest incomes. But I think just as important as that top line number is making sure the housing that's built meets the needs of the people in our community. So we'll also plan for housing that is, of course, affordable to people with all incomes in Eugene, and also advances fair housing choice by providing a diversity of housing types, characteristics, and in needed locations. So in addition to that 20-year kind of total top line need, the ONA also segments our housing need by affordability. So this chart breaks down those 26,000 new units by affordability bins that are based on area median income, or AMI. On the far left in green are units needed for households with the lowest incomes. So that's making less than 80% of the median income, which is typically a level of affordability that's provided through subsidized affordable housing. Next is our need for moderate income housing. That's households earning between 80 and 120% of the median income. And finally, on the right is our need for market rate housing, which is also significant and serves households earning more than 120% of the median income. So I recognize that's a lot of data, but I think kind of the bottom line is that we have an immense need for housing that's affordable to households with the lowest incomes, while simultaneously we're seeing declining federal resources, and the funding we do have isn't going as far. As was discussed during your recent work session on the housing implementation pipeline, this new approach is more reflective of our true need, but doesn't consider the resources we currently have at hand, further highlighting the challenge ahead. So how that fits into our urban growth strategies work, we have to demonstrate how we'll accommodate our 20-year urban growth needs, including for housing, through a sequential process that's kind of mandated by state law. So first, we look at our existing land capacity within our current urban growth boundary. So that's looking at vacant and partially vacant land, as well as through redevelopment. Then we look for new capacity within our current urban growth boundary by taking actions to increase our expected capacity from new development. And finally, our remaining need is accommodated through an urban growth boundary expansion. So I've outlined in black this step of finding new capacity within our urban growth boundary. That's really what we're talking about when we talk about housing and jobs actions, and that's what we'll focus on here for the remainder of the presentation. We don't yet know the scale of these steps. That understanding will emerge through our land supply study work next year. So Terry highlighted this a little bit, and in your HIP 2-year report work session, this was highlighted further, that the city is already doing a lot of work to support housing across the housing continuum. We also acknowledge that what we're doing today isn't enough to meet our community's true needs, and the work ahead will be challenging and require us to move quickly and boldly. We're going to focus our our conversation on housing and jobs actions that we'll propose for your adoption in 2026 and 2027. But we did want to just highlight that there's work moving forward today. This year, council has advanced components of the Downtown Core Housing Initiative, including the accelerated pilot, MUPD pilot, downtown fee assistance, and preparing the North Butterfly lot for mixed-use, high-density redevelopment. You all also recently took action to support annexations and infrastructure investment in the Crow Road area, which is paving the way for future housing development. And by the end of 2026, we'll ask you to adopt a package of housing and jobs actions focused on reducing known regulatory barriers to housing and increasing the capacity of our current land supply, along with the comprehensive plan work that Terry discussed. By the end of 2027, we'll ask you all to adopt a second package of housing and jobs actions, as well as our housing production strategy, which will include actions to be taken over 8 years to help meet our need. But again, given how great our housing need is, we anticipate that we won't be able to accommodate all of the need within our current urban growth boundary. So over the next several years, we'll be working on the steps of a UGB expansion analysis, which we'll put forward for your adoption by 2030. So the 2026 and 2027 packages of housing and jobs actions generally fall into these 4 priority areas I've mentioned: increasing our capacity for housing, reducing regulatory barriers for both housing and jobs development, and encouraging compact development for both jobs and housing in and around centers. Some of the actions we'll propose are true kind of land use efficiency measures that we can quantify the impact they'll have on our current land supply. Others are actions that reduce barriers or costs but might not be as easily quantified. I'm going to start with the housing actions, and then I'll hand it off to Heather to review the compact development and jobs actions. The complete list and summary of these actions is available as attachment D of your packet. We don't have time to dive into every action today, so I'm just going to highlight a few. Of course, we welcome your feedback and questions on any of the actions, as well as your thoughts on what might be missing from our list. So our proposed housing actions include several strategies to reduce regulatory barriers, including allowing microvillage housing as a new housing type, updating the zoning and land use designations for the Royal Avenue node, and reviewing our land use code for needed changes. Others are focused on increasing the capacity of our current land supply, so looking at increasing average densities in our low-density residential areas, and further adjusting standards in other areas based on the results of the land supply studies, as well as through site-specific zoning and changes. We are exploring incentives as well, including allowing housing developers to defer payment of their system development charges and developing a housing acceleration pilot. Other actions include a mix of tools that are focused on advancing city priorities, including encouraging voluntary annexation and supporting more middle housing development. Each of these actions could support dozens to hundreds of new units. Some are actions focused on a specific income bracket or housing type, and others will impact housing across the board. Part of the land supply study work will be to quantify the impact of each of the actions to the best of our ability. Just to highlight a couple, the first one I wanted to look at was to create a new housing type in our land use code and legalize a form of housing we're calling micro-village housing. Housing developers, shelter providers, and city staff have identified this as a priority housing type, especially for people transitioning from homelessness. These developments would include clusters of detached, very small housing units with a sleeping area, an in-unit toilet, shower, and sink. And the units would share a multi-use common building with laundry, cooking facilities, and other services. These micro-units are faster and less expensive to develop than traditional affordable housing, and they provide a housing model that provides both independence and community support. We've also proposed several actions, again, looking at our current land supply. Increasing or adjusting density standards in the land use code is a multi-step process to increase how much housing is built. Low-density residential, or R1, is our largest zone in Eugene, so bumping up the housing capacity in this zone would be a citywide approach. To increase the average density, we could look at establishing a minimum residential density, which doesn't currently exist in R1. We could allow smaller lots, or we could decrease the maximum size for new lots. We think our low-density residential areas are an important starting place, but when we have the results of our new residential land supply, we'll have a more refined understanding of what types of land and what types of housing we're most lacking. To address those specific needs, we may need to further adjust density standards across the city. So in addition to those regulatory tools, we're also looking at new or expanded financial incentives to adopt by the end of 2027. Staff are discussing possible incentives sourced through both research and community engagement, and we expect to propose a new housing acceleration pilot program, potentially focused on supporting moderate income housing within and near mixed-use centers. The specific tool implementing this incentive program could be loans, tax exemptions, SDC reductions, fee assistance, or other tools. So we're exploring the possible scope and administrative needs of those tools. And of course, administration of any new incentive would require some additional staffing and funding. As I mentioned, we're also beginning to put together a longer range set of actions for the housing production strategy, which is a state mandated component of our urban growth planning. Every 8 years, we'll put together an adopted action plan to advance housing affordability, production, and choice. And in coordination with the land supply study work, staff are analyzing fair housing issues to be addressed through the HPS, clarifying our needed housing types, characteristics, and locations, and continuing community engagement and research to develop a draft work plan. So we'll bring this to you for adoption in 2027. We also felt like it was important to highlight a few things that aren't currently on our list of proposed actions, or at least they aren't yet. These are concepts we would want specific direction from council to pursue or may require more resources to implement. We didn't propose any new funding sources at this point, although we know that's a topic you'll likely be taking up as a part of your long-range financial planning. We also didn't propose more significant but temporary regulatory relief in the vein of what the city of Portland is doing, including temporary waivers for major development standards, processes, or fees. Other items that have come up through community engagement or from other cities, but that we haven't put on the table yet, are removing barriers related to certain process requirements like neighborhood applicant meetings. We also acknowledge that some of the city's current neighborhood refinement plans and special area zones contain barriers to housing production and affordability, and addressing these barriers in the long run is important. We'll propose some changes through other actions, such as amending the Royal Avenue node, but it isn't a concerted effort to analyze and address all of the existing barriers in those plans and special area zones. With those caveats, I will hand it over to Heather.
Mayor, city councilors, and audience. Again, Heather O'Donnell with the Planning Division, Senior Planner. So I'm going to move us into actions for compact development and jobs. To advance the compact development policies that Terry discussed earlier, staff are looking at actions to encourage both housing and jobs development in and around centers and key corridors. In addition, we have also identified actions to remove barriers for job development. These are an important companion to the actions to remove barriers to housing that Leah discussed. We are planning for future jobs not only for Eugene's residents who work and live here, but also because Eugene is the regional employment center. So the first two actions listed here are compact development actions, and the last three that are listed here are job-specific actions. The first one, modernizing the compact development overlay zone, is related to implementing the climate-friendly areas direction you recently provided us and was mentioned earlier. Items 2 and 3, I'm going to talk more about these actions. And then the last two, site-specific zone changes and land use code amendments, are both really kind of surgical in nature in that we will be looking at the outcomes of our land supply studies to help inform potential site-specific zone changes, and then also some surgical amendments that we've heard about to our land use code. So, starting with the first one I'm going to highlight, encourage compact development in centers and key corridors. A core component of Eugene's compact development goals and policies will be that moving forward, we need to encourage more development in and around centers throughout the city. Under this action, staff identified a set of tools to allow and/or encourage centers to develop in a compact, walkable, and connected manner. So, for example, create a new or expanded incentive to encourage multi-unit housing development on certain promising sites within or near centers. And this can also help support businesses while also connecting housing to those businesses. Another example, reduce restrictions on where and how the C1 neighborhood commercial zoning can be located. Allow mixed uses to occur horizontally across C1 neighborhood commercial development sites, not just vertically within the same building. And finally, remove the SR site review and/or planned unit development, PD overlay zones, where they create an unnecessary regulatory barrier to housing development. This particular action would likely begin with removing the overlays in centers that are within the Willackenzie and River Road Santa Clara areas, in addition to within newly designated climate-friendly areas. And moving to jobs, the main action I wanted to highlight is directed at our employment zones. So when some of you may recall, when we last adopted our urban growth boundary, we also adopted new employment zones. Those are the E1 and the E2 zones, which were intended at the time to provide more flexibility for employment development, allowing commercial and industrial uses really to mix together rather than requiring separation or having them kind of siloed. But through our growth monitoring reporting, which I'll put a plug in, we'll be sending council the 2024 annual report later this week, so keep an eye out. So through our growth monitoring reporting and through conversations with developers, we know that these zones aren't working very well. We're seeing very little development in them. So we've been gathering ideas for how to revamp them, including simply allowing more types of uses, particularly in the E1 zone, reducing restrictions on some uses. Some uses are allowed only on arterial streets, some uses are limited in size, and relaxing or revising some building and site design requirements.
Thank you. That was a lot of great information that we just threw at you. Before I read the questions, I just wanted to let you know what your next steps are. We'll be asking you to initiate a 2026 adoption package in the fall, when we come back to you in the fall, and that package would include comprehensive plan chapters for housing compact development, and the other ones on the list, as well as the actions that we've been discussing. So a package of actions to increase housing, compact development, and jobs. The questions we have for you this evening are the same ones we asked the Planning Commission last week at their meeting. They are the comprehensive plan policies headed in the right direction? Are the housing and jobs actions headed in the right direction? And is anything missing? And when we asked the Planning Commission these questions, I'm generalizing, but their answers were generally, yes, they're headed in the right direction. And they also wanted staff to consider adding more actions, such as increasing building heights for middle housing or multi-unit housing, incorporating sustainable design into the policies, and taking even bolder actions to boost housing production, compact development, and job development, such as some of the items on that not here yet list that Leah went over. With that, I'll turn it back to the mayor for your Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, all three of you, for that presentation. A lot of great information. I will now open the floor to council discussion, and we have Councilor Clark first in the queue, and then Councilor Groves.
Ladies, all three of you, thank you very much for the presentation. Terry, I should have answered your email a long time ago when you offered the opportunity for us to sit in advance of this presentation and talk with you about it a little more. I didn't do that because I like to do it here first. And the reason is because I'm going to have initial impressions and questions and ideas and things I want to comment on. And I want that to be done in the general public meeting and not privately in advance. So that's the reason I didn't take advantage of doing that. But I'm sure I will have more questions and input as we go along. So sorry we didn't get a chance to do that in advance. This has and maybe because I haven't read all of the details yet of everything involved in the plans for what you'll present in the fall. I'm going to give you my first impression. My first impression is to ask the question, how does this kind of narrative plan differ, in your estimation, from the idea of once upon a time nodal development? How is it different?
That's a great question. How does the idea of centers and mixed-use development in centers differ from nodal development? We've updated our terminology. That's one
Call it
piece.
something else, that's it?
No, the other piece is that nodal development was very regulatory in nature. It developed an overlay zone that required, for instance, a two-story building or required a lot of dimensions of the building. It was a very regulatory approach, and we've shifted our thinking across the state that in order to get the housing that we need and the development that we need to remove regulatory barriers at the same time as providing the zoning and land supply that we need and coupling that with development incentives.
Either you want to add? No? All right. I just didn't want to pick on her, I want to pick on everybody evenly. I would say, awesome, that sounds like a great bit of learning in the process. In what ways, tell me about some of the regulatory things you learned, but also, are there other mistakes in the idea of nodal development that we've learned that now that we're using the terminology differently and calling them centers? What else have we learned other than the regulatory, over-prescription of regulatory plans?
I'll add one thing and then pass it on if my colleagues have something to add. The other thing that I would say is different about this approach is it's much more citywide and treating the city as a whole, looking at it comprehensively. So over the years, we've done a lot of special area zoning, special area planning, and this is really a shift recognizing that we have a citywide issue in front of us, and it deserves citywide policies to get adopted, first of all, as a framework for how we then implement the tools. We had a lot of discussion about this way back in, I'll go back as far as housing tools and strategies. It's been longer than that, but during housing tools and strategies, we talked a lot about the need to finish the housing chapter and the compact development chapter of the comprehensive plan. And so now we have drafts of those. And so we think that's a good thing to move our citywide actions forward in a way that is supported by the policy framework.
Okay.
That's a great response, and I'll just add maybe a specific example. One of the actions is looking at Royal Avenue nodes specifically in West Eugene. That was one of our nodal development areas, and we've heard pretty consistently that the special area zone that implements it is too prescriptive. That doesn't make it very feasible or cost-effective to actually pick it up and develop it. So it's remained a good portion of it undeveloped. In the special area zone, it prescribes exactly where the streets should be, and it kind of locks us into the way of thinking when that special area zone was written. And now, 20 years later, we know
World's
that we
different.
could do things differently. And so removing some of that prescriptive nature from it and encouraging what we want to see, writing policy about what we want to see, but not prescribing exactly down to like the roadway map is just one example.
I enjoyed hearing the presentation. There were what I would call several filters through which you're looking at all of the things that you're doing in order to maximize some long-term goals, density, of equity, of other larger goals. There are two that you didn't mention, and I don't know how we incorporate them. But in my perfect world, we would. And so I guess this is a question, how might we do a better job of considering two other potential larger scope goals? Number one, over half of the structures that people live in our community are not lived in by the people who own them. Home ownership is one of the single best ways to pass on long-term generational wealth and create a better economic standing for everyone who lives in our community. So do we have a framework to anticipate how much of this is going to build rentals versus how much is going to build owned homes? And it looks like I've run out of time, so I'll ask for a second round for
Thank
my
you.
next question. Could you answer that, though? How are we addressing ownership versus renting?
I'll ask Heather to add, and I can take a first run at it. But one of the things you probably heard me say a few times is housing types, characteristics, and locations. So it's a new framework coming from the state, but it, in addition to that top line number of how many new units do we need, it also is what housing will meet the needs of our community members, types being single unit, middle housing, multi-unit housing, characteristics being around, are they accessible? Could you age in place? Could you support multi-generational living in this type of housing? It also includes tenure, so looking at home ownership, rentals, other forms of tenure that are emerging, like community land trusts. So that is one thing we'll have to look at. And certainly we want to plan for both affordable home ownership and affordable rental opportunities to meet our community's needs, and certainly are hearing that supporting more homeownership of different types of housing too, not solely a 3-bedroom single unit home, but other ways to achieve homeownership, like through middle housing land divisions. We have other tools to encourage that. So that's what I would say, and I'm sure Heather has things to add.
Yeah, that was the only other piece I was going to add, is the action council took to allow middle housing land divisions. That is the one stat, not the one, but one of the stats that I didn't bring with me tonight. I can look it up, but we have seen people partaking in that ability to do that land division of middle housing, a middle housing development. And remember, middle housing can be detached or attached, and so that land division can create 2 lots, middle housing lots for, or however many units there are. It can create a land division with ownership for each of those units, whether they're attached or not. And so that's, pretty hot off the press, but we have seen a lot of activity related to that. I would say condominiums is the other one that we've heard a lot about, and unfortunately, there are things that are restricting that are outside of the land use code related to legal issues and right. And so, I think that there's lobbying that's happening about helping to fix the condo code. The good news is that we have seen condominium platting happen after a multi-unit housing development has been developed. And so you don't have to have the condominium done, you don't have to have it condoized, I'm not sure what the right term is, before you build the development. So hopefully we'll be in a good place going forward when we continue to have more housing production. We can, and the condo laws get easier, we can hopefully promote condo platting of existing development. And that creates that ownership opportunity.
Thank
I'll
you.
pick up at
Councilor
right there
Groves.
when we get next round.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I too did not take you up on the pre-meeting, and I apologize for that for a different reason than Councilor Clark. I was just busy. So I may be missing some
Felt
things
that
here.
too.
If this work session were entitled Urban Growth Strategies for Housing, I'd say you did a really good job on that. But I feel the business side, the jobs, our employers, that felt pretty anemic to me tonight, and that needs to be considered in our urban growth strategies. The other half of affordable housing are living wage jobs, and we are short of those in this community. So somehow we need to come back to that. Maybe your plan is to have another work session that's going to focus more on that piece. But I would even say, the community outreach that was done, you hit a lot of really important groups to hit, but I know, speaking with a lot of our employers, they have ideas on workforce housing, and they know what they need to support their workforce. And so that should be a group that I think is incorporated into this and have really good feedback, because they want their people taken care of too. I mean, that's how they attract and retain the best and the brightest to do the work of their businesses. So anyway, I guess I'd just like a response to that and what you're thinking and what am I missing?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab, and then you might want to also talk about our coordination with the chamber on the housing component, if that works for you. But you're absolutely right. We have been very housing focused. New rules from the state are really clear. We're trying to, and they're also being developed right now. So we've got a bunch of things going on. Housing is top of mind for sure. And 100% jobs needs to go with it. Maybe I didn't say that strong enough when I read that slide, but we have been putting the housing work first, and then jobs is, we're kind of moving jobs actions along, but until we do our economic opportunities analysis, which is essentially our study of what our jobs needs are, and projections, which is happening next year. We don't have the same level of detail that we do now with the housing work and the owner requirements. We have the projections. We've got money to work on the housing part of it. The employment is coming kind of second. Some of that is a capacity issue as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just coming a little bit later.
Well, thank you for that. And I don't want to take anything away from the housing effort. That is job one here. I mean, we need it now for the people that are here working right now. But I just want to make sure that that's front and center, the economic piece, because that's going to help us with some of our budget shortfalls. It's going to help us in so many ways be a richer, fuller community. And people need employment. So that's something I want to come back to. And some of these people, some of these employers that are looking at locating here, I met with another group this last week. They want like 100-acre parcels. And, we're talking a lot of jobs. So I just don't think we can lose sight of that. I think that always needs to be right here, even if we're just working on a housing piece. It's like, okay, how does it fit with this need over here?
I can add one more thing too. We've heard that business owners have also had employees that have had a hard time finding housing. And so again, that connection to housing. So again, just want to emphasize, definitely not forgetting about jobs, but housing seems to be kind of touching everything. So we're just acknowledging that connection.
That's exactly why I suggested maybe we include employers in that focus community group, because they're hearing directly from their employees and they've got ideas. And I think it's worth reaching out on that. So, but you're connected with the chamber, that'll get you to a lot of them, but not all of them. There's a lot of employers who aren't members of the chamber. And I'm running out of time, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Councilor Evans.
Thanks for the presentation. I really appreciate it. So I've got a couple of questions, so help me with this. In plain English, what is urban form?
Thanks for the question. Urban form is the arrangement of buildings and importantly, how they relate to the street. And so we talk a lot about compact urban form and not sprawl, and its development pattern where buildings are arranged in a way that's more pedestrian friendly and less auto-focused. And a lot of our development standards in the code reflect that.
So that we don't get kind of the situation like we've had on West 11th, where we build right up to the sidewalk and, not have, the kind of room that we need to maneuver around in those spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always room to adjust our standards as we see how they play out. There were some mistakes with development on West 11th, with the placement of buildings in the setbacks, and we don't want to repeat that mistake. When we talk about urban form and compact development and urban design, which is the name of the policy chapter, we're talking about a set of principles around basically city design for how a city is laid out,
Okay.
how buildings relate to the street, and how easy it is to get from one part of town to another, how easy it is to access things in your neighborhood, and how safe it is. So we talk about sidewalks to building entrances and things like that.
I don't think I'm jumping the gun on this, but I understand when I was driving in that we got $6 million to develop Clear Lake. So we didn't get the 10 we asked for, but we got some of it. So that's going to be critical for us, particularly on the west side. And going into that, that leads into my question about the Royal Node development. So I have heard this for several years, that we have had significant barriers to developing housing out by Prairie Mountain School, pushing out west on Royal Avenue, and a lot of it has been because of the restrictive planning pieces and codes that have been in place for that area. So more specifically, what are the barriers that we are removing in this iteration that is going to promote more development of housing? Mostly, I'm gonna say I see in my mind, more single-family units developed over there, plus as we move north on Green Hill Road, there's significant pieces of Green Hill Road which have been designated for growth and expansion, and specifically housing over several years. And then we're looking at infill of the wetlands that are currently over there now. So, it's a big question, but what does that picture look like from the Royal Node moving north along Green Hill in terms of that area of development and what we can develop in those areas?
I might not be able to give you as much detail as you're looking for today, but you're right that the kind of lack of development near Prairie Mountain is that Royal Avenue node, which is a special area zone and refinement plan that's in place for that area, that's been in place for quite a while. There's prescriptive standards down to kind of what the streets look like and where they will be placed. And so we haven't figured out all the details yet of how we would change that, but really looking at removing a lot of that prescriptive nature that's there now, changing the zoning, changing the underlying land use designations to allow for less constrained development there. I think most of it is currently designated that lower density residential, so I think a lot of that would be retained with the idea of having a commercial, some commercial remaining and some medium density remaining closer to Royal. But we haven't figured out exactly, we need to do some wetlands analysis if we're gonna remove that current zoning. So that's part of why we're proposing this in our 2027 package rather than right up front, needing to figure out how to do that wetlands analysis. I'm less familiar with the area on Green Hill. I'm not sure if it's part of urban reserves or already in the urban growth boundary, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure which piece you're talking about specifically, but in regards to wetland issues in general, I would mention that the city of Eugene has a wetland mitigation bank program. Not every city does, and we're actively looking to add property to that bank so that there are more credits available for developers to purchase and develop their properties. So that program is run by Public Works, and individual properties still are subject to various federal and state rules that they have to work through. But as far as the city, we're a pretty proactive partner in establishing the Wetland Mitigation Bank.
Okay, and then one of the things that I didn't see in the presentation, a couple of things here that piqued my interest was, oh, am I over time? Then,
Just hit 0.
all right.
Next
yeah.
round.
Next
Move on.
round,
Thank you.
round 2.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Kaczynski, and then Counselor Keating and Counselor Ye.
Great, thank you, and thank you so much for the presentation, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to read these chapters. I know it's been a lot of work to get them to this point. To answer the questions you had, I do feel like the comprehensive plan policies, the housing and job actions are headed in the right direction. So I would say, like, keep going in that direction. There may be more specific feedback over time. As far as anything being missing, what I'll say is that this is a really huge challenge for us to overcome. We're not only having to hit a really high target, but also undo some of the things that we might have done in the past that have been counterproductive to these goals. And so when I really look at is anything missing, you'd said that the Planning Commission was saying, like, hey, you should start looking at some of these other actions that are like any action that we have that's on the table that's a possibility, we probably need to be looking at. Because I think it's going to be very difficult to meet these goals, even if we're doing every single thing we can imagine. And so we shouldn't not do things that we think might help. What I'll say, and when I read through the policies, in a lot of ways, I see a lot of common threads from past policies and past plans. And you've already, I think, answered this kind of a little bit. But have we seen, like, major shifts in vision or desired outcomes from previous plans and from previous sort of philosophies, or are we looking at better ways to accomplish goals that have been threads for a long time? I mean, we've been hearing movement of focused development on key transit corridors probably since before I was born. So, kind of thinking about like that, where are we seeing shifts from previous plans, and where are we seeing through?
Probably different for everyone, but I would pick a couple of areas that I think shift the direction of the city. First, within the housing chapter, just because we have a whole new landscape that we're dealing with. The housing policies are much more aggressive and progressive than previous policies we've had. I would also say our community engagement policies, similarly, are more forward-looking and inclusive of the concept of equity than we have had in the past. And then I would point to our community health chapter, which we're not talking about specifically, but we do not have in the Metro Plan. And so that is a new chapter for Eugene that we're proposing that I would say is a shift.
I wonder too if some of it is just implementation. It's not that they were not that they were bad ideas before. They're still good ideas. That's why we're seeing those common threads continue now. Nodes, centers. It's just how you implement it. So we're, I think, trying to find new ways that are more successful to implement, concepts like centers and housing for everyone. That have been in the policies for a long time, but we just haven't been as successful.
And when you've been doing the community outreach, I feel like some of the concepts that are in the plans and have been in the plans have received pushback within the community. And as a result, that's one of the reasons we've had some trouble implementing some of them. I also feel like the landscape has changed over the past few years quite a bit, particularly when we're dealing with the housing affordability pieces. Have you been doing your public outreach? Have you sort of seen a similar shift of people might be less reluctant for some of these things because the situations have changed? Or am I just making that up?
We're not making it up. I agree with you. I think the landscape has changed in the last 6 to 8 years that I've been doing planning in Eugene. Not only has the whole landscape changed, but we are involving a lot more voices, and there are in existence whole groups advocating for housing affordability and for equity that did not exist 10 years ago. So when we have a new policy or a new zoning thing that we're talking about, there are more perspectives discussing it now. And for instance, our community advisory panel, made up of entirely BIPOC individuals in Eugene, have not been at the table in the same way that they are now in previous projects. So that feels like a real shift in the people that we're able to reach with this work and the direction that the policies are going in terms of outcomes.
Councillor Keating. Councillor Keating is not there. We'll go to Councillor Ye and come back to Councillor Keating.
Hey, thanks, Mayor. I'm not going to turn my camera on because I'm still getting over COVID and you guys don't want to see that. But thank you so much for the presentation today. So to answer the questions, also, yes, I think this is going in the right direction. I won't say that I understand every single thing in the packet. Also, I'll probably have to read it after I'm over COVID. But it felt like it was heading in a direction that made sense and was connected to other presentations that you guys have given to us in the past. I'm really glad to hear that you feel like you are bringing more perspectives to the table. I think that always brings us a better final product when we have, whether we take everyone's advice or not, we have all the advice from different folks at the table when decisions are being made. That's fantastic. There were just a few things, and if you can also send this to me later, it doesn't have to be today if one of these sounds like a big answer, because I know we're getting a little close to 7. But my first one was, one of the items on here was to improve middle housing permitting and communication by 2020 or in 2026. And I'm wondering if our budget issues are going to make that difficult to accomplish by that date. I assume that will require staff.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have staff in building and permit services who are already working on this. They are certainly constrained in terms of their capacity, but it's I think a priority to streamline their time as well, knowing the big shifts that have happened in middle housing over the last few years, changing back and forth between our code and the state's model code a couple times. They're really looking at how they can improve coordination between building and permit services, public works, utility providers, to really make sure it's a more, reduce the barriers in the process for folks trying to build middle housing, improve their external communication materials, so updating handouts and FAQs and kind of the information we have available for the public. So they've already started that process and I think are making some headway. So we want to kind of support them in that work. We also want to be mindful that we're, continuing to pay attention to any barriers that are coming up as, the middle housing code is implemented more and more, and be nimble as land use can be in updating our code in the future as well.
Thank you. Second question was, you talked about vertical mixed housing, and it was in the report as well. And vertical mixed use, sorry. So I assume that means commercial and housing next to each other, but in separate buildings. Is that right? And is that something that's hard to do currently?
Yes and yes. And so there are some requirements in our code regarding
Sorry, that's me. Sorry.
requiring if you are doing housing in the commercial zone, specifically, I think in C1, if you're doing housing in that zone, then you're required to have some commercial or non-residential in the ground floor of that building. And so that's what we call kind of that vertical mixed use, because it's two uses on top of each other in the same building or within the same building. And what we're considering is, does it need to be vertical in the same? Could you have it just a mixture of uses on the site and be a little bit more flexible?
Interesting. Okay, thanks. And this last one, you might want to get back to me. You guys mentioned changing, maybe, I think it was removing site reviews and PUD overlays in certain areas of town. And I was hoping maybe someone could get back to me about exactly what that means, because I assume that would take a long time tonight. And I think other than that, I just want to say I'm a big fan of micro villages. I'm really excited to see that make the list of things we're trying to work on. And I actually very much agree with Councilor Clark that any ways that we can support home ownership would be greatly appreciated, I think, by folks in our community. So thank you.
Councillor Keating?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now.
Great. Sorry about that. I appreciate the presentation. Like Councilor Ye, I'm enthusiastic about the vertical housing plan. And I recognize that there are some commercial zoned spots where it is wholly appropriate to have a non-residential buffer on your way up to the housing for a whole host of long-term safety needs. I also recognize the dearth of incentives at the statewide level and at the municipal level when it comes to commercial on the bottom and residential on the way up. So count me in as an enthusiastic supporter of whatever this body needs to do to help expedite the building along transportation lines of commercial on the bottom and residential on the way up. I did want to hone in on the compact urban development piece that Councilor Evans alluded to. Whether it's the Applebee's on 11th, Burger King out west 11th, or even in Ward 2 on the corner of Hilliard and 30th, the new dentist's office, it's aesthetically, this is subjective, but from my vantage point, it's aesthetically displeasing to have buildings come right up to the sidewalk. Moreover, like the building I mentioned on 30th and Hilliard, it's a public safety concern because you can't see what's happening beyond that building. In the Planning Commission or in your expertise, is there an opportunity to explore and embrace an aesthetic compact urban development or design committee so there can be a guardrail for ensuring that these buildings aren't being built right up to the curb? There's a need for aesthetics, there's a need for public safety, and there's just a need for some common sense. I hate to editorialize on the fly like that, but has there been a conversation about such an aesthetics committee?
The first thing I think I would say is that we would want to revisit your discussion. You had a work session on C2 setbacks a couple of years ago, and I'd want to remind myself what the outcome of that was. We don't currently have an action like that included because it's not something that would increase our jobs, compact development, or housing. So it's not an action that would meet the task at hand. That said, there's a variety of ways to deal with implementation of our goals. And so as the council continues to discuss that, we'll take the direction that you all provide to us.
Great. I recognize the conversation tonight is about housing and workforce development, job creation, but we can't talk about all that without talking about parking, Councilor Zelenka's favorite topic. It, in my opinion, is a bit of a pipe dream that folks are just going to not drive for the next generation. how does parking weave into plans when it comes to vertical housing or building along these centers as they're being framed now?
Start that, and then Heather may, or Terry may have things to add. But, and this kind of relates to your previous line of questioning as well. The state is actually, as a part of the climate-friendly and equitable communities work, if you recall, the first stage of that was removing parking minimums citywide. The second phase was designating these climate-friendly areas in downtown and Lower Coburg. The third step will be citywide code amendments to encourage compact development and a walkable urban form. So that work isn't due until 2029, which is why we didn't focus on it tonight, and that'll happen concurrently with our transportation system plan update. But we did want to make sure any code amendments we're putting forward are consistent with those state changes. And they really are, some of them are aimed at design, street connectivity, access, walkability, really all of those kind of components we've hit on through the comprehensive plan work. So any changes that we do make moving forward will have to align with that new kind of state framework around encouraging compact walkable development. So we'll certainly bring more to you on that in the future, but in any code changes we're proposing here, making sure it's in alignment. So in terms of where parking fits into that, we can regulate where parking is allowed on a development site, right? Is it behind the building? Is it allowed tucked under? Where those access points are to get to the parking from the street, or what that parking looks like in terms of pedestrian connectivity to walk through, and trees, and some of the other pieces that were included in that, those code amendments you looked at the end of 2023 now. So that's kind of what I'll say around parking and some of the comments around compact development. I don't know if either of you have things to add.
Okay, I'm going to briefly insert myself into the queue before we head back into round
Mayor, I thought I
two.
had a few more
Oh,
seconds.
I'm so sorry, Councilor Keating. I thought you were done. I thought I
No,
saw you
I'm-
unmute.
I'm-
Go ahead.
I'm not,
Oh,
sorry.
Sorry, you had 2 seconds remaining.
I'm fundamentally opposed to expanding the urban growth boundary in the South Hills. I want to make that abundantly clear.
Thank you, Councilor. I want to pick up on something, Leah, that you were just sharing, and also all of you, again, really appreciating the remarkable amount of technical responsibility that you have in this work, working locally and also at the state level, and then also thinking about our community. Very, very interested to see the work coming forward around centers in particular. And I just want to say very broadly that as we're thinking about this in response to our housing need and housing typologies and affordability of housing, different economic development opportunities, that really what we're talking about are neighborhood amenities. We're talking about places that people within different neighborhoods identify as a heart to their own neighborhood, that are walkable locations, and that are really a part of continuing to develop our sense of our own identity and neighborhood character as we continue to grow and change as a community. So in that way, I think just want to emphasize really positive and note that as an additional point to those bullets related to the centers and their description, that the prioritization of proximity of uses is incredibly important. So really that translates into a prioritization of walkability within areas designated as centers, because it won't work if things aren't close to each other, so that there's a sort of critical mass of interest and fun things to do or interesting things to do or useful things to find in a location that's within a neighborhood. So that proximity and walkability piece, just really important and a part of making places that people really love. Really appreciated the components of the background materials that described the exploration of deferred SDC collection to the point of occupancy, especially for some of our smaller and mid-sized developers and builders. That's a really interesting and potentially influential support that we can offer to getting more housing to the market and then collecting those systems development charges at a time when those units are moving into rental or they're moving into homeownership and there is cash flow into that system. It's really difficult to estimate SDCs at the beginning of a project, which makes them very difficult to budget for, which make them very challenging related to anyone choosing to build housing. So That approach, I think, has a lot of promise in terms of what we can do to support work. The related question that I had is with the micro-village strategy, and if, which I agree with Councillor Ye, very exciting, really interesting, novel strategy to try to bring very small units to market in a sort of collective co-housing type model or co-housing adjacent model. Is there an SDC scaling strategy that's associated with this, given the unit type? Because it's not a typical housing unit.
That's a great question and a great point. I don't think we've quite gotten to what types of incentives we could potentially provide. I think that's something our affordable housing team wants to actively look into, how they can support these types of units. And so I think that's a great suggestion to think about our SDC scaling. We're not there yet, but we'll make it.
Okay, great, thank you. Could also be a really interesting part of this work that is ahead. And then just lastly, you mentioned briefly some strategies in the other ideas category, temporary waivers that are similar to something that the City of Portland is looking at. Can you just describe how what we have in downtown in place now is similar or different from that, and also how this proposal would be different or the same?
Yeah, so right now we have the downtown fee assistance, which I think is what you're referring to. So, you know, a pot of money to support, to basically cover the cost of current fees for development in the downtown core. Portland is actually looking at completely waiving all SDCs citywide for, I think, 2 years. So it's much more significant in terms of the cost, certainly. They are also, you know, Portland primarily looks at redevelopment as opposed to greenfield development, so it's a little different in terms of how they're planning for their infrastructure, but much more significant in scale and I assume in costs that they'll be waiving or deferring.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, round two.
Thank you, Mayor. Heather, getting back to the issue of ownership, home ownership, I appreciate that what you mentioned was at least there's metrics in for measuring home ownership in the process of this, and that the state law is changing in such a way that it allows for greater flexibility for home ownership. My focus, my question was subtly different than that, and it was, put a different way, in many communities in the western United States, you get about 65% home ownership in the city and about 35% rental units in the city. In Eugene, it's 53% rental and 47% home ownership. If we wanted to increase that number and say that at the end of a measurement period of whatever it is, 15, 20 years, choose a period, we wanted to see an increase over that time of ownership, home ownership versus home rentals. Are we measuring for land use and for zoning and for everything else that we're doing in planning to accomplish that if it was a goal? Is there a method by which we might do that?
So the census tells us maybe what you're citing, that a breakdown of 10-year ownership versus renter households, and then it breaks it down further by housing type. Although their housing types don't perfectly align with how we talk about things here, of course, but it's pretty close. So that would be probably the best way, and that would be all of Eugene housing stock. That wouldn't be just new housing. So I'm not sure, you're talking about our percentages overall, over our entire housing stock?
And Terry mentioned that this is more, talking about centers is more of a citywide approach to looking at land use. And I'm saying, if we were trying as a citywide goal to have a greater percentage of home ownership, how might we, I mean, is it one of the goals or one of the methods by which you examine how we bring on new land or how we zone it in order to accomplish that goal? Is that part of it?
think I understand the question.
I know, it's not a clear question. I'm sorry. I'll try better next time.
We can measure it, I think, is part of the answer. Your question about is it a goal is an interesting one. There's not an explicit goal to increase the percentage. There is a goal to increase homeownership opportunities broadly and to meet the needs that as they come out of our housing analysis over the next year in our land supply study. So it's a bit of a sequential, set the goals, assess the needs, and then design the strategies to meet the needs. And we're not quite to that
Well,
point yet.
and like Greg's question, urban form, for example, tends towards a particular style of how we make use of the land in terms of the buildings that get built. And it looks like from the pretty pictures I saw that, and obviously this is limited, a majority of those building types looked like rentals as opposed to ownership opportunities. That's what I'm saying, as we're designing what new lands come in and how we're making use of what centers we have, are we using that as a filter? And if this council so chose, is there a manner by which we could say, or we could decide, how do we increase the amount of home ownership in our community?
Okay, Heather's got something to say.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that we really don't have a good way to measure that at the time of building permit, right? Because we don't ask, is the unit you're building, are you going to rent it or own it? That, we don't ask that. Even if someone was submitting for a single unit house, there's nothing to say that somebody isn't going to rent that out, right? And so that's why I was keen in on looking at the total housing stock through the census or the American Community Survey, because that is the household responding to how they're using that unit. Are they renting it or do they own it? And so that's our best way to do it, and then we can get that down to the block level, but we can't really, the census block level, but we can't really get it in any finer than that without actually surveying individual property.
Right.
Individual units.
Lastly, in my last 20 seconds, I mentioned two things. That was one, my personal goal, that we have more home owners than home renters in the next 20 years. The last is, we have a budget problem. Are we surveying the new land, or at least looking at this through a window or a lens that says, how do we create the greatest amount of taxable value in any land that we're bringing in?
I would say not yet, but.
And can we, is the question,
Yeah,
I
it's a
guess.
good question. It's a good question. I think I might have to prepare a response for you on that one. We do know that what we build, we need kind of all of it. So we'll have, no matter what land we end up bringing in, we'll need to plan for neighborhoods that have fire stations and commercial areas and a
But
mix
we're
of
gonna have
housing.
choices about,
We will have choices about it, and we'll need to do the planning to put in place the zoning that will allow those different kinds of uses that are needed.
I just would say, I guess, in my last, I
Counselor.
hope that's a point on which council can help with their thought processes when those decisions are made. That can be a criteria that we at least consider.
Thank you, Counselor Clark. Counselor Evans, round two, and then Counselor Kaczynski, and that is all I have in the queue for this evening.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. Terry and team, my question is going back towards the wetlands mitigation issue. So we have Fern Ridge as our key mitigation strategy for wetlands on the west side, correct? Or do we have other mitigation strategies within the toolbox to be able to deal with wetlands replacement, particularly in the areas that we have targeted for residential growth?
It's a good question. I think I might also have to follow up for you on that question. I'm familiar with the fact that our team owns several mitigation bank properties and manages them, and is actively looking for another bank so that we can continue to sell credits for properties that need to mitigate wetlands.
How many banks do we have?
Well, that's a good
Jump in.
question.
We have
The
one.
City manager.
Yeah, we have one mitigation bank, but we own several properties through that. And so
Okay.
we buy the property, we restore it, and then we can sell those credits back. So we own some properties near Fern Ridge. We own a lot of properties in West Eugene that we've used for this.
Okay. And a last question would be, I'm going back to slide 20. I noted that you highlighted step 2 and housing and job actions. I kind of want to touch on a little bit of a more touchy subject, and that is the last slide in there, or the last block in the slide down there, UGB expansion. I know that we have talked about that on several different occasions, and Councilor Keating made it very clear that he was not for UGB expansion in the south area. But it looks to me, and it always has looked to me, that we are going to have to figure out how we do proactive UGB expansion that is going to be highly controversial and that we're going to have a lot of pushback on, but it's going to be critical for us to be able to build permanent, sustainable housing as we move forward as a community. So I don't know if that's, I'm positioning that as a question or a comment, but what are we doing to address a future UGB expansion need for housing?
Thank you for that question. I would just point you to the fact that you adopted urban reserves in 2023.
I remember
We didn't bring
that.
that map, but you did adopt an urban reserve for Eugene that at the time was estimated to have 27 years worth of capacity. And since then, we've gotten new rules and a new housing need, which is a lot bigger. And so it may not last us 27 years. But you do have it adopted, and we'll move into it when we have that number sometime in 2027, when we've completed our land study for housing. We'll know how much we need to do outside, and we'll bring you those analyses and options.
And that land banking included unused or underused ag lands?
There are some lower quality agricultural lands included in the urban reserve. It does not include class 1 or class 2 farm soils.
Okay, but I hear a lot about that from people in various communities about, well, we need to, reclaim those areas for agricultural use and not for housing.
Right. Yeah.
And Councilor Krasinski.
Thank you. I think one point I wanted to kind of draw to is that different people have different aesthetics and things that they find visually appealing or comfortable. And so I think, like, as we're having these conversations, keeping that in mind, that just because we have like a building that someone finds ugly doesn't mean that that form is something we should not allow. I can think of about 50 buildings off the top of my head in Eugene that go right up to the sidewalk, and I think that's great. Pretty much all of our buildings downtown do that. And then I think also thinking about the homeownership piece, I feel like there was a bill at the state legislature where there were statewide home ownership targets being set. Did I make that up, or is that, I don't need an answer now. But, it does seem, if I'm remembering that correctly, it does seem like there's some state work on home ownership. And I want to be careful. I do think that the strategies you talked about regarding condos and middle housing land divisions are a really, really important tool to help increase home ownership. I live in half a duplex. It's the most bizarre condo association you could think of. I own half a duplex. And so, when I think about what would work for people as newly constructed starter home type homes, I think the ability to have things like middle housing and condos be ownership options is going to be a key stress in that. And what we're trying to do is expand home ownership by just building detached one-unit homes, those are going to end up being a lot more expensive, I think, than some of these other types that we could work on. Thanks.
Thank you to staff for that presentation. Thank you, council, for questions. That does conclude our agenda for this work session today, and so I now close the June 23, 2025 City Council work session. We are adjourned.